Okay, so we've got quite a deep dive today, and I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, this one's going to be a tough one, but definitely fascinating.
Yeah, so we're talking about Aaron Davis, a 21-year-old who vanished seemingly into thin air back in November of 2022 in Rome, Georgia.
And the story really starts with a pretty strange discovery, right?
Hmm.
An abandoned Toyota Prius found just sitting in a creek.
Yeah, like who just leaves their car in a creek, right? It's not exactly a parking spot you'd expect to find someone's vehicle.
Right, exactly.
Hmm?
And when the police tracked down the owner of that car, well, that's when this seemingly simple abandoned car situation turned into something much, much darker.
Because that car belonged to Aaron Davis, and as we said, he was 21 years old, had his whole life ahead of him.
Yeah, he was on his way to visit friends and his girlfriend.
Hmm.
Just a normal weekend, And then poof, he's gone.
And his family's frantic naturally. His father's calling him, trying to get in touch, but the calls just go straight to voicemail.
So that abandoned Prius in the creek suddenly becomes a lot more than just a strange sight, right? It becomes a potential clue in a missing person's case.
And, we chose this case specifically because so many of you requested it. And I think one of the reasons this case is so compelling is because we get to follow the police investigation almost step by step.
Yeah, we're going to go through the evidence as they uncovered it, see what they knew when they knew it.
And pinpoint those key moments when a missing persons case starts to look a lot more like something far more sinister.
Exactly. So let's start right at the beginning. The last person to see Aaron was his longtime friend, Brandon Ryner.
So naturally, the police reached out to Brandon to try to piece together what might have happened.
Right. And Brandon's initial story seems pretty straightforward. He tells the police that he and Aaron had been hanging out at his house the night before Aaron disappeared. They'd been drinking starting around midnight.
So just, a couple of buddies having a few drinks sounds pretty normal.
Yeah. And Brandon goes on to say that the next day around noon, Aaron started throwing up, got sick, and told Brandon to leave him alone.
So far, nothing too out of the ordinary, right? I mean, we've all been there, maybe had a little bit too much to drink.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And Brandon says he went to sleep, woke up much later, around 1 or 2 a.m., and that's when he noticed Aaron and his car were gone.
And he even told police that he was already out looking for Aaron when they contacted him. So, on the surface, he's painting this picture of a concerned friend.
Yeah, just a guy worried about his buddy who might have wandered off after having a bit too much to drink.
But as we'll see, those initial statements, they're really important because they set a baseline, and when the details start to change, that's when the red flags start to pop up.
Exactly. And those inconsistencies are just the tip of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
The police decided to pay Brandon a visit at his home a few hours later to gather some more information. And that's when things start to get a little more complicated.
So during this visit, Brandon sticks to the drinking story, mentions red wine again, but he also adds some new details.
Yeah, he mentions that Aaron went upstairs to use the bathroom and was being sick.
But he gets pretty specific about it. He says Aaron was standing up while being sick, which, I don't know about you, but that seems a little odd to me.
Yeah, it's a strange detail to add. And then he goes on to say that after Aaron went upstairs, Brandon went downstairs, dropped a bottle, cut his pinky finger, and had to go to urgent care.
Urgent care for a cut on his pinky. Now that seems a bit excessive, doesn't it?
You think a Band-Aid would do the trick.
Yeah.
But he insists that he needed urgent care. And he also mentions taking a shower and going to bed before waking up to find Aaron and his car gone.
So he's adding all these extra details, these errands and activities, and it starts to feel a little less like a casual retelling of events and a bit more like a carefully constructed story.
Right. And it really raises questions like, why go into so much detail about needing urgent care for a minor cut right after your friend goes missing?
It just doesn't quite add up, and those initial doubts are starting to form in the investigators' minds.
Yeah, they're not quite buying it. And to further try and convince the police, Brandon emphasizes how long he and Aaron have been friends. Since 5th grade, he says, really trying to establish this strong, innocent connection.
And he keeps reiterating this idea that Aaron's probably just sleeping it off at a hotel, trying to downplay any potential danger.
But the problem is Aaron's car has already been found abandoned, so that explanation starts to feel less and less likely.
So the police decide to take the next step. They ask Brandon if they can have a look around his house, just to see if they can find any clues about where Aaron might have gone.
And Brandon agrees. Seems cooperative on the surface, but this is where the investigation takes a really sharp turn.
Because once they're inside the house, things get a lot more suspicious. Several doors are locked, including the one to Aaron's room, the very room where he was supposedly sick.
Right, and that immediately throws up a red flag. Why would that specific room be locked? So he's trying to hide something.
And when they finally get that door open, what they find is deeply unsettling. A strong chemical smell hits them as soon as the door opens.
Like someone's been trying to clean something up. And not just a little bit of cleaning. We're talking a major cleaning operation.
And it wasn't just the smell. They found an excessive amount of cleaning supplies in the room. You know, way more than you'd expect to find in a typical household.
It's clear that something happened in that room.
Mm.
Something that someone tried very hard to cover up.
And the discovery that really seals the deal and shifts this from a missing persons case to a potential crime scene is the blood.
Yeah, a significant amount of blood was found next to the bed. And it wasn't just a little bit. It was enough to make it clear that something serious had happened.
And the police reports, they're very specific. They say it didn't look like fresh blood. It looked like it had been there for a while.
And adding to the suspicion, they also found some powder in the room.
Now, the reports don't specify what kind of powder,
Hmm.
but given the strong chemical smell and all the cleaning supplies, it's not hard to imagine what it might have been.
Bleach, maybe? Some other kind of cleaning agent? Whatever it was clearly an attempt to conceal evidence.
So this is a huge turning point. The police are now looking at a potential crime scene, and I think Brandon realizes that things are about to get very real for him.
Because right as the police are searching his house, he does something completely unexpected. He bolts.
Yeah, he jumps a fence and takes off running towards the nearby houses.
And the police, they lose sight of him. They put out a call. Possible 1043 suspect run back toward.
And that 1043, that's police code for a suspect fleeing on foot. So now they're not just looking for a missing person, they're looking for a potential suspect in a crime.
And this sudden flight, it's incredibly telling, right?
Yeah.
It suggests that Brandon knew the police were closing in on him, that he knew something was wrong.
Absolutely. He goes from cooperative witness to fugitive in a matter of minutes.
So the police, they immediately start canvassing the neighborhood, trying to track him down. And they get a lucky break. One of the officers encounters a neighbor who happens to be on the phone with Brandon's father, Jeremy Ryner.
And the officer takes the phone, speaks to Jeremy directly, trying to get any information about where Brandon might be.
And Jeremy's reaction is interesting. He expresses surprise that Brandon's not home and says that he suggested Brandon go look for Aaron.
He even mentions that he himself is about an hour away at the time.
So at this point, Jeremy seems genuinely unaware of what's transpired at his house and why the police are looking for his son.
But after that phone call, Jeremy returns home and makes a crucial discovery. He finds Brandon's phone.
Now, you'd think his first instinct would be to hand the phone over to the police, right? I mean, it could hold vital clues about Brandon's whereabouts or what happened to Aaron.
But he doesn't. He holds onto the phone for a while, and that hesitation, it speaks volumes.
Because when the police speak to Jeremy again later, his demeanor has completely changed. The initial surprise and willingness to help are gone.
He's hesitant to give up the phone without a warrant, and he even acknowledges the significant amount of blood found in the bedroom.
So something on that phone, something he saw, changed everything.
The police, they theorize that it was text messages that caused this shift in Jeremy's attitude. And when we look at what was eventually revealed from that phone, it paints a horrifying picture.
Yeah, some of the notes found on Brandon's phone were deeply disturbing. Things like his scream became a gargle as he swallowed his tongue.
That's not just disturbing, that's chilling. It's a violent image that sticks with you.
And then there are these other phrases that are just so unsettling. I like dark places where my mind melts. It feels so good and I feel so cool.
My brain's a waterfall running out of my nose like drool. I mean, these are not the words of a stable mind.
And what's particularly disturbing is this almost boastful tone in some of the notes. I can turn myself on in the blink of an eye, he writes, followed by, they notified me as the smartest man alive.
There's this strange disconnect from reality, this inflated sense of self-importance. It's really quite frightening.
And then there's this to-do list found on the phone, and it seems to outline his tasks for after whatever happened to Aaron. It includes things like schedule last 3 songs, presumably for his YouTube channel.
But then it's followed by these mundane, everyday chores. Vacuum laundry, shower in my shower, take bath tomorrow.
This juxtaposition of these horrific details with these everyday tasks, it's just so jarring. It's like he's trying to maintain this facade of normalcy after presumably committing a violent crime.
It's deeply disturbing. And then there are the text messages, one sent to someone named Rachel saying, Rachel, that Aaron threw up horribly. I think there was some blood in it.
And later he texts her again. I woke up and he was gone.
So he's creating this alibi, this story that Aaron left on his own after getting sick.
But when you consider those texts alongside the blood evidence and Brandon's sudden flight, It becomes clear that he's trying to deceive everyone.
And it seems that Jeremy seeing those messages on Brandon's phone completely shattered any denial he might have been clinging to.
Because just an hour after that second conversation with the police, Jeremy calls them back. He says that he's with Brandon and is willing to surrender him.
And 25 minutes later, Brandon and his parents arrive at the police station.
When they get there, Brandon is described as eerily calm. No visible emotion, no outward signs of panic or remorse.
Especially after being on the run and knowing what the police had found at his house, you'd expect some kind of reaction.
Right. But he's just calm, collected, almost detached. And during the initial interview, that calmness persists. He doesn't offer any explanations, doesn't try to deny anything, just requests a lawyer and refuses to answer any questions.
So while Brandon's staying silent, the detectives speak to Jeremy and Brandon's mother. And this is a huge turning point in the case. Jeremy provides information about an old cemetery fill, he spells it out phonetically, and he gives the police directions to a possible location.
So he's gone from potentially obstructing the investigation to actively helping the police find Aaron.
And it's a clear indication that he believes something terrible has happened.
Jeremy also shares some information about Brandon's mental health. He mentions that Brandon came home from college because he was having anxiety attacks and visions.
He says that Brandon was diagnosed with OCD as a child.
And it's important to note the context here. While this information might offer some genuine insight into Brandon's state of mind, it could also be part of a strategy to build a case for an insanity plea later on.
It's a complex layer to an already tragic situation, but regardless of the motivation behind Jeremy's disclosure, the information about the cemetery proves to be tragically accurate.
Based on his directions, Aaron's body is found buried in a secluded area of the cemetery. And in a particularly horrifying detail, he was wrapped in the sheets from Brandon's house.
So any remaining hope is extinguished. The reality of what happened is undeniable.
And with the discovery of Aaron's body, Brandon is officially arrested for murder and taken to prison.
And throughout this entire process, law enforcement officials note that he remains eerily calm and unfazed.
It's chilling to think about.
Yeah.
And then comes the heartbreaking task of informing Aaron's parents.
Can you imagine getting that news that your son has been murdered by his friend? It's just unimaginable.
And so the case moves into the legal system, and on July 18, 2024, Brandon pleads not guilty by reason of mental insanity.
But the court ultimately rejects that plea.
He then pleads guilty to murder and mutilation and is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
So this case, it started with a bizarre discovery, an abandoned car in a creek, and it quickly unraveled into a horrifying crime.
And it was Brandon's own words and actions that ultimately led to his conviction.
That phone that Jeremy found held the key to unlocking the truth. And Jeremy's decision to cooperate with the police was instrumental in bringing Aaron's killer to justice.
That's a tragic case, a senseless loss of life, and it really makes you think about the complexities of these kinds of situations.
The shock and disbelief, the denial, the potential role of mental health, and the chilling insight into the mind of a killer.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and I think it's important to take a moment to reflect on everything we've learned.
What stood out to you the most about this case? What are you going to take away from this deep dive?